Welcome back to another video for the Linux and SQL series. Again, still leaning towards the Linux side on this video. Promise you, I assure you soon enough, I'll be into the standard query language side of the series. Now, what I'm going to do is in this video, I'm going to do a few activities with specifically getting help in the command line, right? So as a security professional, right, you won't have all the answers all the time, no matter how long you've been in the business, right? But you can learn where to find them. Now, one of the great things about Linux is that you can help get right through the command line. Now, what I'm going to do is actually use a couple different commands myself in this video. I'm going to actually use the man and the whatis commands to get some information on other commands and how they work, right? And I'll also use some apropos command to search for the manual page for a command as well with the specified string. And working as a security professional, right, we definitely would find it very useful to know how to discover which command to use or information about what commands do, right? Now, with that in mind, let's go ahead into our scenario for this video. So let's paint the picture, right? I, as a security professional, have to find more information about commands that I need to use, right? So I need to discover which command to use to perform a certain task. So first, I'll do a few things as far as exploring a few commands that I can use in the shell to learn more about others. Then I'll also find an option that I'll need to add to a command and, use a command to get a brief description about another command or things of that nature. But first, let's actually dive a little bit into learning more about commands in general, right? So I'm going to just explore a few of them that I can use in the shell to learn more about the functionality of other commands, right? So first, imagine I can't quite, or you can't quite remember what the cat command does. And I might want a quick reminder, which is really short for concatenate, right? So if I do whatis, if I run this, right, it's going to be like, what is what? What are you talking about, right? So, right, if I do this instead, right, then it's going to say concatenate files and print on the standard output, right? So now there it is. I have my answer, right? So now let's actually imagine that I want more detailed about concatenation and all of its options, right? So I can actually use the command for man, right? Cat and cat. So then it concatenates file, the synopsis, option, file, description, right? Standard output, we know file or when file is, restandard input, number non-blank, and things of that nature. It just, the command, it returns a general description, right, of cat and information about each of its options, right? As far as like examples, which is, this is really good, robust with knowledge if you really want to get a nice firm understanding of what a particular command does, right? And you can output normally more information on, as far as one line at a time by pressing, by using enter. I'll put the next page of the manual by, pressing the space bar. So, right. So let's actually, let's also imagine, right, that you've remembered there's a command that prints, right, just the first part of a file. And I can't remember the exact command. The apropos, actually, let's figure this out. Apropos, there you go. The apropos command is useful in these instances, right? And I can use keywords with apropos to find a command. So let's actually do, I did this here, I'm not sure what's going on with either the lab or the computer. Let's see what's going on. There it is. Perfect. So if I wanted to know, right? Perfect. Right. What? A prop. Okay, I misspelled it. There it is. Head one, output the first part of a file. Now, there's not necessarily no right or wrong in using this command in terms of keywords. But think of it as a very focused search, right? It would only return commands that corresponds to keywords that you supply, right? So just keep trying. If the first return command doesn't necessarily provide what someone or what you may need if you're running the command yourself, but also you want to keep in mind that with the minus or subtract, however you like to say it, lowercase a option will limit results to only the commands that match all keywords supplied, right? So now we can actually move on to the next task, which is exploring the user add command, right? Which I actually went over either the last video or a few videos ago when I added a new user. In this case, was an employee, and my example that I used who had just come onto the enterprise, right? Now in this task, what I'm going to do is actually, let's say, imagine that I want to set the expiration date for a temporary user account, right? They have a contract that's only for a set amount of days or months, right, with the enterprise, and I want to make sure that they have the proper access first and foremost, and second, the proper access for the exact amount of time that they're supposed to, right? So it's set automatic. I don't have to manually go in and delete them necessarily. I probably should after X amount of time, but I don't have to go in and manually remove their access. Oh, I forgot, it's this particular date. Let me make sure that everyone, it does it on its own because they have a contract for X amount of time, right? Now I know I need to use the user add command for this, but I'm not quite sure, or I may not be quite sure how to complete the task, right? So I might realize that it involves adding an option to the command. So I'm going to use the most appropriate Linux command to get help on the user add command and learn more about all of its options, right? So I'm going to use, let's see. So let's hand you a page what you want. That is so awesome. But nonetheless, this would be, let me see, page manual. What? Or I would actually use, what was the first one that we used here? It was, let's see. Oh, actually, you know what? There it is. All right, perfect. I knew something was kind of throwing me off. I added that additional E there. Don't ask, but I added the additional E in the command. But nonetheless, use the most appropriate command just to get help on user add command in particular, as far as what all its options are. I can actually just space bar or but nonetheless, I got more information as needed as far as the user add command. Right now, what I'm going to do for my next task is just explore the remove and remove directory commands. Right, so I need to determine the difference between the letters for these commands would be RM and RMDIR. I've used them before, I believe, in a prior video, but imagine that these commands were used before. Again, I used them prior to now, but let's say I can't remember how they're different, right? Which is, um, I'll keep going. Now, I can also use the most appropriate Linux command to quickly remind me of what each command does, and if not, Linux will remind me also. But nonetheless, let's say if I wanted to remove only an empty directory, I would use, not that one. I would use RMDIR, right? Now, obviously, there's no directory I'm giving it. So of course it's going to say, hey, try again. But nonetheless, I would use that sort of command following the directory that I wanted to have removed, right? So for my next task, I'm just going to determine which command to use for a given scenario, right? So let's imagine that I need to create a new group but I can't remember what command to use, right? I need to identify a command that's going to do this by searching for it through keywords, possibly, right? At least, let's see how I can get there adjacently to see if I'm across the street from where I need to be as far as the proper address. At least when I get to the incorrect address, I can see the correct address from across the street because of the strategy that I'm using, because I can't remember the actual street number of the address. But I understand that when I get there, I'll see the home, I'll see the house, let's say, if I lost where I'm at in the subdivision, let's say, and I say, okay, let me go to that corner, let me go near this area. And once I get there, to kind of jog my memory of where I really need to be at, right, as far as the proper destination. But nonetheless, let's say, again, I need to create a new group, but I can't remember what command to use, right? And I need to identify this through keywords, right? Again, it's in conjunction with the house analogy, right? So in this case, I will use the keywords, create a new group, right? So let's see, what's the most appropriate Linux command with these keywords to identify what command in particular to use. Let's take a look here. I would do group add. All right, visit new group. Let's see. All right, so let's try this again. And one thing I did forget is this particular environment, I'm going to have to use commands with other commands, right? So now I'll put sudo in front of group add because I knew what again, it's always user error, right? Computer do what we tell them. But nonetheless, I knew it was group add, but then when I kept going, I'm like, yeah, this doesn't seem right. So I knew it was, again, user error. It was something I was missing, right? So now when I place sudo group add, then I get a different response that I like as far as creating or cultivating the proper environment to create a new group, as far as the proper commands to use it. But nonetheless, this brings us to the conclusion of this particular video with getting help in the command line with the Linux bash shell. It showcases practical experience with these commands as far as getting a short description of one, displaying the manual pages for a command, and finding commands based on keywords about their functions as well. To help me, a bit better with navigating the Linux command line, particularly at least for me, a security professional. So this brings us again to the end of the video. In the meantime, to the next one. In my Linux and SQL series. Stay curious, stay secure.